So back to the scene of today's action, Federal Parliament House. It was the last day of sitting and it was like the last day before muck-up day. And what a day, an economy still in free fall and a branch stacking scandal that keeps on giving. I caught up with Sky News political editor Andrew Clennell a short time ago. Andrew, firstly, these unemployment figures, the actual figure of 7.1 was pretty much bang on what economists were predicting. But as you pointed out to the Prime Minister in that press conference today, it's a lot more than that because of the drop in participation, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've often wondered about unemployment figures. Basically, we had 800,000 people on JobSeeker or the dole. That's increased to 1.6 million. So before this crisis, we had 5% unemployment. Basically, you've got more than 10, and the Prime Minister admitted that in a sense. I mean, he didn't even allude to the 7% unemployment rate, Chris. He made a point of saying we've lost 800,000 jobs since February. Just said it flat out. That was the figure he was looking at, and therefore kind of acknowledging that the unemployment rate's more like 11.5%, which is just shocking, isn't it? I mean, 30 years ago was that horrible recession that Paul Keating never lived down, and then the worst unemployment got was 11%. So we've got a long way to go, might even go higher. I think the lesson out of it, I guess, is there's going to have to be government intervention in the economy for much longer than the Prime Minister had hoped. He's trying to work out now how to do that so it's affordable down the future in terms of the paying down of the debt.
Yeah, if you think about what may happen when JobKeeper runs out on the 27th of September, we've got 3 million people on JobKeeper. So if half of those, and I'm only guessing here, but if half of those don't really effectively have a job, you throw in the number that are no longer chasing a job, it's almost 2.5 million Australians who may not be working come September.
I think it'd be more like 10 to 20% who don't have a job once the restrictions come off, and that's why it's so important there's not a second wave of the virus, which there doesn't look like there will be unless we open our international borders at all. So I think it's more like 10 to 20%, but you're right, that's hundreds of thousands more, right? So it's a terrible situation. It's just that the economy's contracted because of the shutdowns, and there's some businesses aren't coming back, some jobs aren't coming back. So that's where the PM starts talking about IR reform, the energy sector and gas, manufacturing, infrastructure, which I think is massively important. That's got to be the next big stimulus, and it has to be substantial. You know, you can't nickel and dime it. You can't muck around in the budget and do a bit of smoke and mirrors, 10 billion here, 10 billion there.
No.
You really need about another 100 billion of it, to be honest, and that pump primes the economy and gets it going. So I'm hopeful that in the October budget we'll see a bit of that. They've made it clear that in this July 23rd budget update, sounds like a mini budget, we'll know what they're going to do with JobKeeper, and I think it will stay for some sectors, particularly those related to international tourism, which are effectively still shut down. So, look, what happens next will really define Scott Morrison and Josh Frydenberg's careers. And I saw that weigh on the Prime Minister today, in my view. He knows how important his decisions are now, because you don't want to make the recession deeper and longer, and you don't want to make the unemployment queues longer as well. So it's a crazy situation I'm talking to you about, Chris, when I say if we can end up with unemployment just at 9 or 10%, that's going to be a good result out of this.
Yeah, quite extraordinary.
My fear is, and what you've just alluded to, that if we could get to 12 to 15, certainly 12, and that's just dreadful.
It is. I want to talk about the branch stacking scandal, which bubbled along further today. Apparently, Andrew Byrne was sent home with his tail between his legs after being counselled by Anthony Albanese. They can't have him on the Committee for Intelligence and Security. Although they didn't punt him today, Albo won't have him there in a couple of weeks, will he?
I don't think he will, because from what I've heard, there's more text messages to be published, and he's disparaging of colleagues. And I just think further revelations there will mean his position on that committee is untenable. So some I heard might even relate to the deliberations of the committee, that sort of thing. Ooh. So he'll be making judgment, casting judgment on that. So I guess that's the problem when you tear down someone who you've been very close to for a long period of time these days, the way text messages are, you make yourself quite vulnerable.
In the Labor Party, as you know, revenge is a very, very professional activity. They do it very well, don't they?
They do, but I think everyone in politics does. But yeah, the Labor Party can be a bit nastier than the Libs at times, certainly than the Nationals. So I think he won't be still on that committee. I guess he'll still be in Parliament. But there's a broader issue here, or broader questions about what it will mean for the Labor Party and division in that party, particularly in Victoria, one of the few states where they polled really well at the federal election and continue to do well. It's the last thing they need leading into the next federal election. And that's a massive challenge for Anthony Albanese now. And yeah, as I say, it's the last thing they need, that kind of division.
Richo was telling me last night he didn't think that this issue would affect the Eden-Monero by-election, but it's got beyond just simple branch stacking, which I think, you know, the public expect goes on in most political parties. This is about real deep divisions. Probably soon enough we'll find out within the federal Labor Party and, of course, within the Labor Party between the federal Labor Party and the Victorian Labor Party.
Yeah, I mean, still, I mean, as much as our viewers like hearing about these interesting stories about this political division, I think the vast majority of the population are focused on other things like job losses, so and that electorate bushfire recovery. So I tend to agree with Richo on that one, actually. Chris, I was in a cab last night, and certainly the Labor scandal wasn't raised with me by the driver. The only thing he raised with me was Daniel Andrews' comment, you shouldn't go to Adelaide. So it looks like that particular distraction comment by Daniel Andrews worked. So I don't think it will have much of an effect. What you find is voters tend to think all politicians are dodgy, all politicians are crook. So it kind of cancels itself out. But it's whether the party can function properly at the federal level if they're this divided. And you seem to have Albanese and Miles on one side and Shorten on the other, and still some distrust at a leader from the left taking over the Victorian branch and making changes to the New South Wales branch. So it's whether Albanese can keep the show together on the way to the election and therefore keep his own job. They're the challenges, I guess, any opposition leader has, but because of this scandal, it's much more acute.
They're two of the worst jobs anyone could ever have in charge of the Labor Party federally and the Prime Minister of the nation. They can have them as long as they want them. Andrew Clennell, thank you very much for your time.
Good on you, Chris.